Here we are again to listen to stories that will make you think, laugh, and just gasp in awe. Like, that happened? This is Internet Recap's weekly compilation. Do not forget to click the like and subscribe button. If you like this video, share this with your friends while you guys are having a good time or trying to find something to do. Do not forget to leave the timestamps of the best stories for others to see. What did you do as a teenager that you will never tell your parents? Story 1. I really didn't want to go to PE one day, but I didn't have a good reason, so I knew my dad wouldn't write me a note. So what I did instead was get a plain piece of paper and asked him to sign it because we're doing a thing in English where we try to guess the personality of a person from their signature, which he totally bought. I then went to the printer and typed out your standard sick note, stuck the signed plain paper into the printer, so when the note printed my dad's signature would appear at the bottom. I will probably tell my dad this at some point because I'm actually kind of proud of myself for pulling it off. My sister is amazing at copying other people's handwriting. She used to make some serious coins when we were in high school and got a lot of people out of school for the day. This was my high school talent. My mom taught me her signature when I was 12 because my reading class had a daily reading that needed your parents to sign for a grade, and she was just not about that. I signed all of my own paperwork from then on, even things she wouldn't have necessarily agreed with. I did the same thing, but also at some point I realized nobody at school knows, frankly cares, what my mom's signature looks like. They don't go through and do a handwriting analysis between the beginning of the year medical form and the field trip permission slip. As long as you don't sign it Mom or something, they aren't going to know. Although I did have the added insurance, I could be pretty sure if anyone ever tried to call my parents, they'd back me up and said they signed whatever it was. For me, if anything, it looked more suspicious when my mom would really sign something and I had to sign it next to hers. Our first names are pretty similar, and we have the same initial and last name, and when I was leeching my signature originally, I based it on hers, so our real signatures look very similar. My forged one was different. Story 2. My time to shine. My senior year of high school, I snuck out of the house at like 2 a.m. to get some. My parents were a little psycho and put bells on the front and back doors, in case of burglars. But they didn't put them on the laundry room door, which led to the garage. The garage had a side door in it that led outside, so obviously that was my way out. The problem with that side door is that it's a bit hard to tell when it's locked, since you can always get out, but not necessarily back in. So me being stupid and frisky, just assumed it was fine and went along my merry way. Did the deed, then when I tried to get back in, I found the door was locked. Oh crap. I tried every other possible entrance, all locked. But I had my phone and an idea so crazy it just might work. I called my mom and in my best helpless daughter voice, cried, "Mommy, I woke up in the front yard and the door was locked. I'm so scared." She came right out and got me. I mumbled something about sleepwalking, then she made me waffles since I was so distressed. My mom still tells the story when the family gets together. I now have a reputation as a crazy sleepwalker. Got laid, lied to my mom, then she made me waffles. See, there's a trick to those you can go out but not always come back indoors. Get a pair of needle nose pliers and slide the bolty thing without actually fiddling the doorknob. Might require a bit of bending of the plate thingy that goes around the hole where the bolt goes in. Pardon my overly technical language. Screw it, just stick with the sleep and walk thing, and eat the waffle things. It's less confusing than your attempt at English. Plus, you get waffles. Story 3. My mom still recalls this one day when I was unusually positive and talkative with her. It's because I was high out of my mind on Ritalin. I had a mini breakdown when I took Ritalin once and called my mom at 6 in the morning and told her how depressed I was and how anxious I was, and that a lot of the problems I had were because of her and my dad. Not a proud moment. Sorry, Mom. She learned it from Dr. Teeth in the 60s. The guy from the Muppets? Maybe I was thinking of a different guy. I'm exhausted right now. The dude I'm referring to was famous for promoting LSD and had a funny nickname. He went to festivals and had come-down tents for people on bad trips. My mom let my friends all come over right after graduation. Believe it or not, she got together with the other moms for us to have a little party, complete with a few malt beverages and beer. We gave my mom all our keys. We turned up the music, we got out a table. We proceeded to play D&D all night. My mom still thinks we got drunk. It would break her heart to know the truth. To be fair, getting drunk and playing Dungeons & Dragons is one of my favorite pastimes. Whiskey and D&D definitely lead to in-game shenanigans that have nothing to do with the plot in my experience. Story 4. My parents were both out of town but left the car with keys in the kitchen. Anyway, I was 16, just learned how to drive, and this girl texted me to come pick her up and come back to my place. 10 minutes later, I'm grabbing the keys and driving across town in a car that I shouldn't be in with no license. They are never going to find that one out. I took my dad's manual car out for a ride a few weeks after he tried teaching me it, only managed to stall it once, and when I did, I seemed like a pro getting it going again. When learning to drive a manual car, the first thing you learn is how to quickly start it back up after stalling. It still amazes me how in Britain, most of our cars are manual. If you pass your test in an automatic here, you can't drive a manual. You have to do a test in a manual to drive manual, but you can drive automatic if you pass in a manual. Story 5. When I was about 15, I took half an eighth of mushrooms and maybe 8 or more quercetin pills and went downstairs to watch a movie with my parents. My parents were always fighting back then. They really hated each other, and I hated them as well. But for some reason, that night was very pleasant. We were all laughing and joking and having a genuinely good time. Meanwhile, the walls around them were breathing and the carpet was swirling beneath me. I was having trouble focusing on their faces. That would be the quercetin, but I wasn't in the least bit paranoid that they may know I was high. It was an extremely strange night. My dad and I are friends now, and we've talked about our drug use when we were younger. He was getting high in his room while I was getting high in mine, and angrily taking my weed when he caught me and smoking it himself. Apparently my mom was the one who was adamantly anti-drug. Dad just put on a show for her sake. But for some reason, I've never mentioned that night to him. Plot twist, your parents weren't even home, and you were having a conversation with a lamp and a candle. Story 6. Not me, but my cousin. His parents go away for the weekend with explicit instructions not to take the boat out. As soon as they round the corner, he's pulling the boat out of the garage. My cousin, Tim, and his friend, Eric, go to a local lake to go water skiing. Eric is pulling Tim behind the boat, and Eric starts to go in circles to make waves for Tim to jump. Eric is sitting on the edge of the boat while driving, so he can more easily look back to make sure Tim hasn't fallen. The boat hits a big wave, and Eric is tossed out of the boat. Now the boat is going in circles with Tim skiing behind it and nobody driving. It's getting closer and closer to the docks with each pass. Eventually, Tim swings wide and swims as hard as he can to get out of the water before the boat comes back around. Someone on one of the docks sees what's going on and jumps in the boat and shuts it off, just as it scrapes one of the docks. They took the boat home, had a buddy repair the scratches, and never said a word to my aunt and uncle. Story 7. I snuck out of the house with a friend while I was staying over with her to meet a group of boys. She hooked up with one of them in a truck while the rest of us, me and the other 2 guys, hung around in the desert at night trying not to notice the truck rocking back and forth. I must have been 14 or so. Never did anything like that before or since. I went with her because I was afraid she'd get in trouble with the boys by herself, so I wanted to watch over her. We got caught by her parents, who told me they were going to tell my parents. I prepared to be grounded for life. Then her dad changed his mind and told me I was a good kid, and he would let this one go. But we had better not sneak out of his house again. Needless to say, he went through this a lot with his daughter. I never told my parents and never will, and I'm 28 now. Did she ever repay the favor? No, because I never snuck out of the house to do it with boys. Oh my God, you're a real-life Barb. Story 8. A friend from high school and I snuck out with her boyfriend who could drive when I was 14, she was 15. He let her drive the car, and she crashed it. It was his dad's car, his car apparently being in the shop. I didn't really get too hurt besides some bruises, but we had to walk miles home at 3 a.m. We got home right before anyone got up. What happened with the boyfriend? He actually got beat up a bit and was bleeding from his head, so he called the police and paramedics came. We left before they came, so he just said a deer ran out and he swerved, hitting the pole. Since he wasn't under the influence or anything, police didn't see anything off about it. His dad's insurance ended up covering it somehow since he wasn't on his dad's policy. I do specifically remember his expensive watch got shattered in the accident, and my friend was really worried about that, almost as much as the car. I put a rug under a pine tree in my grandparents' front yard and boned the neighbor girl at least twice a week. Good times. The front yard? A rug? That's really classy. Story 9. I was trying to convince my dad to buy me a new computer for college. He doesn't exactly like the fact that I play video games due to the Asian Middle Eastern mentality of study till you pass away, but I'd been doing it for so long, he begrudgingly accepted it after realizing it wasn't just a phase. However, he made it clear that he would only buy a computer for the express purpose of helping me get a computer science degree. Shocker, right? Unfortunately, he wasn't tech savvy at all, so I searched online stores until I found a laptop that I wanted to replace my old crappy one with. It was an $800 Asus gaming laptop with middle-of-the-road specs for the time. There was no way he would ever buy me a laptop that was built for the express purpose of gaming. So I used Inspect Element to replace all instances of the word gaming on the product page with the word studying, and made sure not to reload the page when showing it to him. It would change the words back into gaming. It worked, and within 1 week, I got my new studying computer. How have you seen a person's life be ruined in a single day? Story 1. Like 7-ish years ago, a bunch of the crew chiefs at my guard base were out celebrating one of their own who got his associate's degree. They were all drinking, not a ton, and eventually went home. Except for one guy. He stayed and drank until last call. He decided to drive home. He hit a 20-year-old who was on his way to work at about 2 a.m. and turned him into a paraplegic. Our wing commander basically told him, plead guilty to the county and go to jail with an administrative discharge. His family would have been able to keep some of his benefits, like the VA loan and GI Bill, or fight it, lose, cost his family tons of money, and get a dishonorable basically is like you never even served. He pleads guilty. Dishonorable like you never served in regards to benefits. Any bonuses you received you have to pay back. Medals are rescinded. It is also listed on job applications, and people deny you because of it. I know a dishonorable is like a felony, but to do it is a long process. Regardless, if he got convicted in civilian criminal court, his discharge was hey, you still have 2 years left in your contract before reenlistment, so you're just going to resign right now instead. Also, to the people who think that he got away scot-free, he didn't. He went to jail. Felony DUI and assault with a deadly weapon or something like that. The wing commander only allowed him to do at least one selfless thing and still be able to transfer his GI Bill and VA loan to his family. He also had to pay medical expenses for the kid he hit, and probably other damages as well. So it's not like he got a free pass on that. My brother snuck out after curfew and got drunk at a nearby bar with some buddies off base, got in a fight with a Marine, and ended up digging up generators, testing them, then burying them again for months while waiting to be dishonorably discharged. He hasn't exactly gone up from there, and I don't suspect he will be with us for long. Story 2. I grew up best friends with my sister, and one day she didn't come home from work. I was 16 at the time, she was 22. I heard my parents start to rumble around the house, turning the lights on, and I could hear more commotion and panic. The cops had called our house because they found my sister's car damaged on a street in the middle of a neighborhood with the driver's side door still open, and they found one of her shoes was in the middle of the street. The next morning, still no sister. She worked as a bartender. She left work that night and some guy followed her, sideswiped her car, and when she got out to swap insurance, he kidnapped her and put her in his truck and drove off, and that night continued to violate and abuse her and held her captive through the night and into the next day. My sister managed to escape that next day and run to the nearest house, banging on the doors. The homeowners let my sister in and called 911. They could tell she had been beaten and attacked. She was taken to the hospital, which is when we got the phone call where she was. She had 2 broken ribs, her face was nearly black and blue, both black eyes, and scratches all over her body. After that, I've never had my sister back. She survived the attack, but she suffers horrible anxiety and panic attacks. She can't go out in public alone. She drinks heavily and is terrified to move out of my mom's and live alone. I don't know, I just used to look up to her, and we would laugh and watch movies and bounce on the trampoline, and she would drive me to the local food chains, and we would listen to music, and ever since, I've never had my big sister back. I'll always love her, but it breaks my heart. In one day, her life changed for the worst. This is so sad. I'm sorry that happened. Story 3. One of the former anesthesiology residents in the program here was in his last CA3 year. He was an emergency call, which comes after C1, C2, and C3, and basically never ever calls in, but you have to be available in the event that you do get called in. Most people will sleep with their phone on or go out to the movies or do basically anything within a 30-minute drive of the hospital. Some crazy car accident happens that night around 2 a.m., and multiple trauma cases are going back into the OR. Our dude fell asleep and his iPhone did some automatic update, so he didn't get the call from the hospital immediately. His pager battery also died sometime that evening. He doesn't realize any of this until he's getting ready for work the next day at around 5:45 a.m. and sees his phone blown up. Shows up to work at 6, fired on the spot. Guy was 2 months away from graduation and starting salary of $400,000 a year plus overtime. His iPhone did some automatic updates. I haven't suffered consequences anywhere near this, but my phone has done that before in the middle of the night. Everything would have been completely fine, except I had a pin just to boot, so it sat on the enter pin screen all night. I took the boot pin off after that. Story 4. I used to work the front desk of HR for a big hospital. There was a cute elderly gentleman who had been hired for the janitorial staff. I onboarded him and remembered how sweet, kind, and appreciative he was all the time. One day, a few months into the job, he came to the front desk and looked completely different. His light spirit was gone and had been replaced by something much, much darker. He had come in to set up counseling appointments and proceeded to tell me why. He was on the job when he received a call that a patient had fallen and he needed to go to X spot to help clean it up. That was it. Of course, he didn't realize until he arrived at the scene that the patient had jumped to her peril from the top of a 5-story garage building. He was the first person there, totally unprepared for the gruesome scene. No one had warned him of what he would find. No one thought that the poor janitor could have been spared from seeing that. My heart still goes out to him. This was 8 years ago. I hope he got lots of counseling and was somehow able to move on with his life. He didn't have to say much for me to understand how deeply traumatized he was. A poor soul. Story 5. A really nice man who owned a gaming cafe here, a place with many computers connected on LAN where people go to play games together. Age 33, has a wife and 2 kids. I know him. I used to frequent his place a lot, and one early morning, I was going to his place to just play and stuff. The place was not open that morning, and his business partner was walking around asking where his partner was. I told him that I hadn't seen him that day. Turns out that his house was hit by a missile. I live in Syria, so this is more common to me than most other people on this earth, but dang. His home was burned, and he and his children did not make it. The worst part, his wife is a college professor. From what I was told, went to work that day before the missile hit. She was in the university when she lost her husband, children, and home. Everything she had, gone in just one lovely Mediterranean morning. I don't know much about her, I just hope she's all right these days. As soon as I saw a gaming cafe, I was bracing for something along the lines of him being busted for child porn, but holy crap, I couldn't even imagine it being so much worse. Story 6. When I was in EMT school, we were told about a paramedic student, instructor was a paramedic as well, who observed a stabbing call. They arrive at the bar and see a dude with a knife in his abdomen. A medic student takes lead and pulls the knife out, something you never do, as I'm sure you know. Senior medic loses his mind at this dumb butt, asking him what the F he was thinking. Student freaks out and, you guessed it, puts the knife back in the patient. He passed away as a result. Student lost any chance of having a good job, not even just in EMS, and was charged with the loss of the patient. Might have been manslaughter, I don't remember. His entire life was ruined because he freaked out and made a mistake on a call. Not a rookie mistake or a common slip-up, but in about half a minute, he ruined his life. Holy crap. Also, the fact the series of events was 1. Man stabbed, 2. Thank God EMS is here, 3. Man stabbed again. Story 7. A girl in my class got caught with a thermos full of vodka, and when the teacher caught her, she got sent to the principal's office. Well, when the principal asked her why she was drinking, the girl told him that she had been sleeping with the school resource officer. Dude was a cop stationed at the school, messing around with a 10th grader. I got dragged out of the school by officers that worked alongside him. At the court hearing, they found out he was doing it with 2 more girls at the school. His wife and 2 kids were in the courtroom to support him because he told them he was innocent. That kind of caved when one of the girls had a video of the 2 of them doing it. Our former special resources officer is now dating a former student who is the same age as me. We graduated in 2015. He left his wife and kids for her. We all shuddered when we remembered how often she was in his office during the school day, having lunch and hanging out, whatever. Story 8. I watched a kid get an underage alcohol violation. Wouldn't normally be a life ruined, but he and I were both college students at a university that had been on the news a lot for the drinking and party culture. The culture had been the same since the 70s, but they didn't like the bad press, so they cracked down. Like 2 months before this happened, they instituted a new policy. It used to be that you would deal with the legal implications, then they would make you go to an alcohol education program, and you wouldn't be able to study abroad. Now they suspend you for the rest of the semester, make you move out if you live on campus, and they cancel any financial aid the school is providing. I didn't know him well, but I do know that he, like me, had student loans on top of a generous financial aid package, and because of the aid program we were in, it's unlikely he could afford to come back without the financial aid package from the school. What's a horrifying fact a person could have lived happily not knowing? Story 1. Because of the cellular makeup of our eyes, we see better in low contrast light in the periphery of our vision. The way the cells work means they have a much lower activation, so in the dark or between very minute monochromatic differences, you'll see better out of the corner of your eye than your central vision, which is more geared to complexity and color. So with that in mind, theoretically, if there was something you could make out in the corner of your eye, but not visible when you look directly at it, it could really be there. Whilst this is true, please be sensible with this knowledge and remember our brains are hardwired to freak us out and pad out our senses. The vast majority of weird, creepy things we see, hear, or feel are partially made up by our brains, and the things which aren't are nihilistically uninterested in us. Turns out being paranoid was so advantageous to our rock-wielding ancestors that it just kept breeding true, no matter how well we climbed the food chain. I mean, it has no real detriment. We occasionally look stupid because that hanging jacket in the corner of the room looks shady. Better be afraid of a jacket than not aware of a predator. Story 2. There are some diseases caused by prions, a type of infectious protein for which there is no known cure. Prions accumulate in your brain and damage your nerve cells irreversibly, leading to seizures, loss of memory and speech, blindness, changes in personality, and loss of mobility. They kill off brain cells and create literal holes in your brain. Once symptoms start showing, most people perish within a year. Some people are believed to have been infected by eating infected meat. It can be spread by surgical tools. The tool was sterilized between patients, but the process isn't enough to remove prions. If someone has a prion disease, we use disposable tools on them, if we know. Since the disease takes a while to reach critical mass, we could be spreading the prions from one person to the next via re-sterilized tools until the first patient perishes and we think to check and inform others they might be infected. But there is no known cure anyway, so you just need to wait and see. Life pro tip, don't eat human brains. Just don't. Story 3. Male otters are extremely sensually violent and aggressive. A significant number of female otters, otter pups, and baby seals, yes, baby seals, have their lives ended from the trauma caused by often forced sensual encounters with male otters. Causes include, but are not limited to, drowning, internal perforation, and biting. Dolphins can also be pretty awful. They've been observed to participate in gang rape of female dolphins and, again, seals. Poor seals. They're like the unconsenting living fleshlights of the ocean. Living fleshlights of the ocean? I feel like this was originally the jellyfish until it got sick of that stuff and became poisonous and electric. Said to himself, "Stick your dong in me now, witch. Do it. It would be worth it just to see you do it." Jellyfish, probably. Story 4. In the 60s, there was an experiment to attempt to teach dolphins to comprehend English, even going as far as to attempt to teach it to speak English itself. The experiment went south when one of the people working on the experiment, Margaret Howe Lovett, started to have intimate relations with a dolphin named Peter, something she claims the dolphin initiated. At the same time of this, one of the other people involved, neurologist John C. Lilly, was given the go-ahead to start experimenting with LSD, and so decided to also use LSD on the dolphin. Due to a gigantic cut in funding, they were forced to move, and the dolphin was kept in horrible conditions, and taken away from his trainer/sleeping buddy, Margaret, and so committed seppuku by drowning itself. Whoa, you're making it sound really weird. She was just jerking the dolphin off, not getting boned by him. Story 5. At all times, we could be surrounded by fourth-dimensional beings, but we just can't see or detect them in any way because we live in the third dimension. They could be observing and studying us at this very moment, and perhaps the reason why we haven't found any aliens yet is because they are fourth-dimensional beings. Studying us. The ape is touching himself, again. The only difference between us and fourth-dimensional beings is they can move freely across space and time, while we are limited to a particular location in relation to where we were previously and a particular time now. Essentially, they would look like teleporting time travelers. We could still see them. Past the fourth, though, you're right. We wouldn't be able to because they would be in a different universe entirely. Story 6. Quite a lot of people who try to end their lives by jumping in front of a subway survive. Well, that makes sense considering you can't be run over by a sandwich shop. I had a job in a subway station in January. I spent 2 months there. Every 3 days, someone jumps in front of the subway train. In 2 months, only one guy perished on the spot. Thing is, when you stop a subway line, you get a ticket for each minute you prevent the line from moving. So the seppuku guy will get hit with a ticket of subway train repair and cost, first responder cost, firefighter, police, subway special team, and a hefty stoppage ticket. 'Twas crazy to see and hear the screams of people witnessing. Story 7. This was told to me by a relative that works as a funeral director. Some parts of your body might start decaying a few days before you perish. I can definitely confirm. I'm a hospice nurse, and I also did end-of-life care with geriatric patients for many years. You always recognize the smell, and it never changes. I may be misremembering here, but is it usually feet first? I briefly worked in a nursing home and was part of caring for a guy who was on his way out. His toes first went black, then his feet, then he ended his life. Someone mentioned the scent of the end of life, and I will never, ever forget that smell. Story 8. Rabies. Remember to go to the ER if you're bitten by any wild animal that can potentially carry it. Rabies is very nearly the worst way to go, and that's considering having your life ended by starvation, fire, drowning, or jumping from an airplane. You go into delirium and a deep fear of water, and slowly perish of lack of water as the virus bursts into your brain. Best case scenario, Milwaukee procedure, you end up brain dead. I would personally shoot myself if I was diagnosed with it. Point is, bats are particularly likely to pass it on. The post-exposure treatment is highly effective, but it only works before the virus reaches your brain. Story 9. There could be a gamma ray burst coming for us, and we wouldn't know until we all got literally obliterated from existence. Also, the universe is so large that not a single thing that anyone does will matter. Not a thing. Most people who disagreed with me are technically correct. This is one of those mostly correct discussions. The universe is so large that not a single thing that anyone does will matter. Not a thing? Nonsense. I just baked a delicious cake. I find that comforting. Story 10. Hundreds of toddlers in the U.S. have their lives ended every year from falling into septic pits and drowning. When I was 5, we used to go over to my mom's friend's house, and there were these massive rednecks in this old house where the septic was broken and would run across the yard like a small creek between these 2 cement things with holes in the top. Anyway, her oldest daughter was about 8 and dropped her homework paper in it. I reached to grab it and fell right in. I have a full memory of it. The hosing off and everything. Must be a crappy memory. Story 11. When a brown recluse spider bites you, your skin will often start to rot around the bite. This is only in very, very rare cases, and often with immunocompromised patients. Also, many pictures you see online are actually staph infections. The side effect of most bites is simply a hard welt that doesn't appear to heal well for weeks, where the skin necrotized. Anything worse, and you can go get a shot from the walk-in to cure it. Most people in the southern U.S. have been bitten by a brown recluse at least once, and don't even know it. Story 12. Diamond dust is a horrifying poison. When ingested, your body is unable to round off the sharp edges like it can with glass. It will cling to your insides. The muscle movements of your guts will scrape your insides. The dust particles will get pushed deeper and deeper until you end your life of internal bleeding. It takes months to perish from this, and you will be in immense pain. Once inside of you, there's nothing that can be done anymore. Please, someone prove me wrong. I would gladly accept this as just being a myth. Story 13. Chick culling is the process of ending the lives of newly hatched chicks for which the intensive animal farming industry has no use. It occurs in all industrialized egg production, whether free-range, organic, or battery cage, including that of the UK and US. Because male chickens do not lay eggs and only those on breeding programs are required to fertilize eggs, they are considered redundant to the egg-laying industries, and are usually called shortly after being gendered, which occurs after they hatch. Many methods of culling do not involve anesthetics and include cervical dislocation, asphyxiation by carbon dioxide, and maceration using a high-speed grinder. Asphyxiation is the primary method in the United Kingdom, while maceration is the primary method in the United States. By 2020, U.S. producers expect to gender the eggs before they hatch, so male eggs can be culled. Story 14. So people might not get as freaked out thinking about space as I do, but I found out yesterday that there are sounds in space, but we can't hear them because it's a vacuum. I googled space noises, and there was like this vibrating sound that was apparently from the sun, and it freaked me out. Too long didn't read. There are sounds in space, we just can't hear them. NASA recorded them. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.